Sula by the great Toni Morrison is a multifaceted novel. It is first of all a story of the friendship between two very different Black women, but two halves of the same soul, Sula and Nell, over a period of almost 45 years.
It is about what we all have experienced as young girls growing up, having a really deep friendship, and then losing that friendship.
Many people can relate to it if you've ever had a really good friend or family member that you were very close to, and somewhere along the line, you have a falling out.
Sula traces people's lives in the bottom, when a white farmer had promised a slave rich bottom land in exchange for his labor. The slave was given hilly land, where planting was backbreaking, where the soil slid down and washed away the seeds, and where the white people in the next century longed to live, far from the farms and factories of the valley.
I was drawn to it when I read it because some of the characters were familiar. Although it took place very early in the 1900s, it still was familiar today.
Her depiction of a socially and racially divided town full of death and destruction helps the reader to understand life in a small town in an earlier era.
Coming up as a kid, I remember being down south in towns similar to the one that Toni describes.
Hate, sarcasm, loss of life and lack of identity bring unhappiness to an area which is supposed to be the bottom of heaven. Morrison describes this recreation of the Black experience in America with both artistry and authenticity. The novel has been called a howl of love and rage.
Toni Morrison talks about topics that other authors don't touch, and even if they do, they can't craft them the way Toni does, and Sula is no exception to that.
Toni Morrison is a central figure in the lives of all Black foxes. She brought us together. We carry her with us in our hearts as our muse and mentor.
What can you say about the ever astonishing Toni Morrison? Whatever she touches, leaves such a permanent impression.
She's a gift that we treasure because she keeps on giving.
And it's still, for me today, as interesting the first time as the third time I've read it.
If you have an appetite for love, loss, lust, and betrayal, Sula. Tune in for the next episode of The Black Foxes, the book discussion. Sula. It's about friendship. It's about love. It's about loyalty, betrayal, and sex. So, what about friendship, Deborah?
Friendship as the very core of two souls coming together and connecting in an impenetrable embrace.
And what breaks friendship, Valencia?
Betrayal.
Betrayal.
Mistrust. Misperception.
There you go.
Yeah, all of those can easily break a friendship.
When we ask the question about what is love, what is betrayal, what is friendship, I think that they coincide together. They live together the way joy and sorrow may live together.
People often compare the relationship between Sula and Nell to the relationship that they've had in their own lives, where a friend that you thought you could count on, that you thought had your back, kind of let you down, but then in the end, you thought that maybe, perhaps you were wrong. You ever had that experience?
I have, actually, and not just friend, but also family, where that can occur, where you're so sure about the relationship that I think you can take it for granted, that you might not put as much work into it as you should, that you may not have as many protections in place as you should. And in doing that, you become vulnerable.
What drew Nell to Sula? Anybody?
Well, I think they're a classic case of opposites attracting.
The same thing. The same thing.
Yeah.
They are so unalike that they sort of go hand in hand. Sula was certainly more of an in your face, but Nell is more laid back and more thoughtful. To her chagrin, I think, at times. But Sula was much more vocal. You knew where she was coming from all the time, whereas you could attach things to Nell.
And Nell came from a more conventional family.
Absolutely.
However,
Or so she thought.
So she thought, exactly.
Tell us
Because
about
it turns
grandma.
out that the grandmother was similar to perhaps the women in Sula's family who were billed as being exotic, eccentric, loose. And think about friendships. You know, friendships, usually we make up for the other side. We make up for what we are lacking, and that's what brings friends together. Look at how we have come together.
Well, the saying that friends are the family you choose is very, very true. Because we don't have control over what family we're born into.
Not at all.
But we do have control over the families that we create, via our friendships, via our marriages, via our circles, our different circles, associations. So
isn't that kind of why Nell chose Sula? Here she was, this straight-laced family, very strict upbringing, very strict mother, until, as you said, she goes to New Orleans and sees that her grandmother was a prostitute, a lot worse than Sula's family, because they were involved in all kinds of sexual escapades and relationships for the pure joy of it. Yes. Her grandmother did it for money. So she came back really strongly committed to living a different life or a more exciting life than she had before.
But it was in her all the time. I think
clearly.
as the book progresses, we can see that there's more of Sula in Nell than even Nell realizes. Sula is able to express what she feels. Sula is Sula's transparent. There is no pretension when Sula reacts or behaves. But Nell, I think, is constricted by these societal mores which say a lady is supposed to comport herself in a particular way. But a woman, on the other hand, thinks, feels, says what she means without fear that she will not be sanctioned by whatever society's rules are.
But talk about when Sula comes back to town. Here Sula comes back, she's dressed to the nines, she's educated, she's been around the world, and what was the reaction of the women in that community?
Meow. The claws come out.
The claws came out.
She was different.
Well, and different doesn't bode well.
No.
Particularly
in
not
small
big town.
in small towns, but she came back polished. She came back knowing.
And more desirable than ever.
Absolutely.
She was beautiful.
I mean, she spent 10 years away. She grew up. She saw things that these people had never even imagined. That kind of experience changes you inherently. And not only do you realize it, but the people around you see it even more.
Her aura.
Absolutely.
Her entire aura was
But what was she that made them most afraid?
Well, she was wanton. First of all, she was wanton and she loved men. But she only loved them for as long as they were useful to her. And not beyond that. We're not talking about an emotional attachment. We're talking about plain old ordinary get down sex. That's what she cared about. And you could see it in her comportment.
But didn't it bother them that she was single?
Yes.
She hadn't married. And what did they do? They got very protective of their men.
Well, it was a put down of their lives, their lifestyles.
Started
But
cleaning
also,
up their children.
They
They start taking care of their kids,
taking
taking
up
care of
their
their
house,
men.
they
taking
were
care of
Sula
themselves, dressing up
because they felt that
themselves.
she personified evil. Because Sula was so free, so eccentric, she didn't care. She threw their men away. See, the women didn't mind that their men slept with other women.
That's right.
Sula used them and threw them away, and they were almost offended by that.
that was the insult.
That
That was the
she did not want them.
That she didn't want their men.
Exactly, that she just used them temporarily.
So this book is so fascinating because in the first half of the book, we see the town. We see them grow up. We see the mores. We see the complete falsehood of everything this town is built on. Everything from living in the bottom, but you're really living at the top in the least fertile land of all. We see all of the issues around women and marriage and Nell getting married, Sula going away. And now we find out what really happened to everybody in that town. Let's talk about PLUM. PLUM goes to war. PLUM comes back a straight up, strung out drug addict. And what does his mother do when she sees her son disintegrating?
Yeah, it's almost an abomination. The very idea that a mother would take the life of her son. But then you think, wait a minute, there's a kind of sick logic here. He is an abomination. And rather than see this beautiful child, remember, he was a beautiful baby. He was handsome. He was anything a mother could have ever loved or wanted. And then he became this thing, this unidentifiable thing.
He became just a man who had issues. I mean, you remember when he came into her bedroom and tried to have a relationship with his mother. And she talked about birthing him once, but she could not let him in to birth him again.
That was an abomination,
deep.
incest.
And so when she saw that she could not birth him, she decided she needed to kill him.
Well, you know,
to put him out of his own misery, because he wasn't going to get any better. She
And her out of hers, too.
And her out of hers.
But it also reminded me of the Middle Passage and what some of these mothers did to save their children from slavery and the life they knew that they had no other option but to live. And so in her mind, as twisted and, you know, as we may think it would be, that was the only option. She was not going to allow her child to live that life.
I wept at that part, because to me, I thought it was the epitome of mother's love. This was her son. She loved him. She saw that he was sick, he was gone. And to me, it was the ultimate act of love. She sacrificed her only begotten son. And when she did it, I can't find the passage right now, she held him in her arms. She rocked him like a mother holds her baby. And then she did the ultimate act. I thought about that movie. They shoot horses, don't they? There was no other choice. They shoot horses, don't they? But she loved him. She cradled him. And then she doused him. And then she set him ablaze to take him out of his misery.
Let's talk about Jude. Nell's husband. And Sula sleeps with him without blinking an eye. What'd you think about that, Deborah?
Well, you know, there are situations in fiction, you read it and you kind of go, what would Jesus do? No. No. My real reaction was, I thought Nell handled it differently than I would, because I tend to be more reactionary. For her
More
to
like
like
Sula.
yes, for her to kind of back out the room and, you know, be puzzled and what, I mean, confrontation would make more sense to me. The one thing I can say is that it's irreparable.
Okay, irreparable, unforgiving.
That's what I have found.
Unforgiving.
Because of the relationship between Nella and Sula.
Right.
Yes, because of the irony is always that the women will blame each other.
Because didn't you find that
as opposed to
problem?
blaming him.
She didn't blame Jude. No, she blamed Sula.
She went right to
Why do
Sula.
you think that is?
Well, I think because of the love and the friendship and the high regard that Nell had for Sula. See, I think that
she thought was
Nell
reciprocal.
backed out because she was thrown into such a state of cognitive dissonance. She just could
believe
not
it.
get her head around the fact that I don't think she even recognized who they were. Here's her husband. She has this idea of what marriage is about, of fidelity.
Yes.
Here's her very best friend. Sula really did not understand loving a man. She did not understand what it meant to possess a man. She did not understand what it felt like to be jealous of a man until Ajax
Mighty
came along.
Ajax.
And, you know, it says here that Sula began to discover what possession was, not love.
I don't even think it's naivete. I think she had never had her world rocked until Ajax
mighty
came in.
Ajax.
Everybody's had an Ajax. Everybody's had that one guy who knows exactly how to touch you, how to move you, how to rock your world. And when that happens, all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, so this is what it is. This is what it is. And then you want more.
And before she knew that, she was naive about it.
Exactly.
Now she knew. Now she knows.
What was so interesting was he rocked her world, touched her soul, no doubt about that. She didn't even know the man's real name.
Didn't even
Never
know.
knew.
It didn't
Oh,
even
I
matter.
love that.
It didn't even matter.
I did too.
And that's the
Never
beauty
knew
of Toni
his
Morrison's play on words
did
and
that.
writing.
Well, it didn't matter until she wanted to turn good sex into good love. And for some men, never the twain shall meet.
And let me tell y'all one thing. Y'all are my sisters. Y'all are my best friends, but there's no way on earth I would understand any of y'all sleeping with Greg.
But it's just sex, Joyce.
Just
Nothing personal, girlfriend. Just
I know
sex.
he's a good-looking man.
I mean,
but
he's
that
attractive.
is not something I would understand or forgive. Somebody challenge me on that.
Well, we will discard him afterwards.
What?
You can have him back.
I'll take it a step further. I have never gone out with a guy that one of my girlfriends went out with. Ever.
Bingo.
That's it.
Never.
That's
Never.
like,
You know what?
Never
I
voting.
did by accident, and as soon as I found out, I corrected the accident
Okay.
all right.
and had no clue.
So to me, and this is my own, my little mindset, and because there is a familiarity that he would have had with her that I don't want to come behind. That's
Valencia, you
my
looking
own
like you know,
personal-
I guess we can go in more.
Oh, well, no. Maybe the question to ask is, when did you meet Marvin? Did you meet Marvin?
And how?
I met Marvin in college,
Yes.
and I was dating Marvin's best friend.
This is new.
A true Jude. That's why his name is Jude.
And this is fine to discuss because we talk about this all the time. But yeah, I met Marvin's best friend first, and I was dating him, and then I met Marvin, and he
You dropped him for Marvin.
Well, no, because he was actually engaged to somebody else. So
Oh, what a tangled web we weave.
Exactly.
Wait a minute. Romans take back.
But we were young and we were in college, and and 25 years later, we're fine. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. So
Sula slept with Nell's husband. Husband.
exactly.
They were best friends for all their lives. That changes things a little bit.
And I respect Sula's authenticity,
yes.
and how she lived, but
But she crossed the line.
there are just
She did.
lines you can't
She
cross.
crossed the line.
She did.
There's
She
a
crossed the
cost.
line.
And not only that, but her arrogance towards Nell when Nell finally confronts her.
And what does she tell her?
She makes no
She said,
apology.
we share everything.
Yeah, and
What's your
no, we
problem?
don't.
She couldn't even see where she had crossed the line. And what's interesting is that when Nell eventually visited with Sula's grandmother, Miss Peace, one of the things that Miss Peace said when they were talking about another incident, what's the difference between
You
the
were there.
The two of you.
you?
Right.
And so others saw them too as being one in the same.
And basically saying you knew who she was all the time.
Exactly.
So don't act like she's new now.
Yeah. Well, as you know, in our communities, our moms, what do they always say to us? You are judged by the company that you
That is
keep.
true.
So you may be hanging out with Sula and pretending that you would never go there. You'd never do these things. But at the end of the day, there's something that connects the two of you. And as my mom would say, you're just like her.
What do you, at the end of all of this, after all this discussion, she was a hoe, she was a free spirit, they were best friends, she betrayed her. What's the real takeaway?
No matter who comes into your life, the only person who's going to be constant with you is your sister friend. She realized that she really didn't miss Jude. She missed her friendship with Sula. And as she said here, we were girls together. We were sisters together. I don't agree with the portrayal, but at the end of the day, to me, the story is about the love between sisters.
Because she still, when she was on her deathbed, her sick bed, she still had to go see about her.
And a
She
part
had
of that
to.
is forgiveness. I think that Nell forgave Sula.
But I also think that it's about living authentically. Because in many ways, Sula had a much fuller life than Nell did because she lived the way she wanted to live. She didn't really care what people thought about her. She didn't care what people said about her. And did that ostracize her? Yes, it did. But she had that woman, when she closed her eyes, she had lived.
And what was her last thought?
I gotta
gotta
Nell
tell
that death doesn't hurt.
You know, I'm nodding my head because I'm thinking of the words, to thine own self be true. At the end of the day, you are authentic. We may wear the mask for some, but among one another, we are our true, natural, authentic selves. And that is the crux of this sisterhood.
Well, for me, it's apples don't fall far from the tree. Her grandmama was a hoe. Her mother was a hoe. She is a hoe. That's my takeaway.
And I love it when my sisters can keep it real.
Absolutely.